So here we go. We're rolling there, rolling there. You look gorgeous. Do that.
What's that do?
Oh, it shows me a spike in the audio because I have to. These are doing separately, so I have to do it later.
Okay.
You look great, Grammy. Okay, so first of all, tell me or thank you for doing this. Thanks for sitting down with me.
You're very welcome.
And tell me your name and where you're from.
My name is Wynn Huffman, and I'm originally from Ohio, from Kenton, Ohio, which is near Columbus, Ohio. And I went to Ohio State University. And anyway, I have moved around a few years, married, and of course my husband and I have moved various times. So what else? So what's this next?
Okay, good. So tell me a little bit about your childhood. Tell me like where you grew up and what it was like. You know, how did you spend your days, and what was the scenery like? Did you live in a city? Did you live on a farm?
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, what was it like when you, and use complete sentences. So say when I was a child or.
Okay. I grew up on a farm in Kenton, Ohio, and I had an older sister who was 5 years older than I was, and I was really a tomboy when I was growing up, because my dad always wanted a boy because he already had a girl, so he made me into a tomboy. And so that was one of the things that I learned to enjoy. I lived on the farm, enjoyed it, had some nice friends for a while, but sometimes they moved away. So I played with boys a lot of times, and so we did a lot of bicycling, we did a lot of Monopoly games and all that kind of thing together at either one's home. So that was my main thing then. And that was one of the main things I enjoyed so much was when I got acquainted with wanting to ride a pony, and my dad was able to get a hold of a pony, and it was wild, more like a wild painted pony. So he made me stand inside the fence on the out in the at the farm. When I say outside the fence, I mean in where the horses were. And he allowed me to stand inside of that only because he wanted the pony to get acquainted with me, so we could be friends. And so the pony would come racing towards me with his ears folded back, because he was going to tell me a thing or two. That was his attitude, because he was a beautiful horse, mainly a small horse, but a large pony. And he was definitely going to be in control of all situations until I had a chance to get to know him, and then it turned around so that I became the one. So I rode the pony bareback, and all my neighbor friends who still live there would stand back and run really hard and jump onto him on his bareback by the tail. So we finally ended up, instead of just me riding, it would be sometimes 4 children riding on the pony at the same time, and he loved it. His name was Diamond, and he was an extremely well-behaved pony also. So that was one of the things when I grew up as a youngster.
And tell us about the tennis court.
Oh, then when I moved to high school, we did not have a tennis court in Kenton, Ohio at the high school, but being a tomboy, I learned how to do various things that boys usually do. So my sister and I decided I wanted to get a tennis court so we all could play tennis out there. And so at that time, I went to the encyclopedia and found the rules and regulations on how to play tennis and how to build a tennis court. And I built that with my dad gave me the opportunity to use the tractor to clear the field and all that kind of thing. And it was really made out of a chicken yard, and the chickens had already eaten off all the grass. So all we had to do was to clear the field to make it the tennis court to make it level. And then my sister and I would we bought the tennis net and of course the posts and all, and we put the tennis court together, and then we naturally became rather popular because a lot of kids would come out from the high school to play tennis out there. So we had a lot of fun at that time.
I love it. So Grammy, just remember to look at me, okay?
Oh, it's so hard to do that.
Really? You'd rather look at the camera?
Okay.
Okay. Cool. So, wait, so were there other animals on the farm?
Yes, oh yes, we had the regular horses and cows, and of course we had grew corn and wheat and all that. And of course, when it came time to harvesting all this food, all these different fields and so forth, we had to help on doing that. And making hay, I had to pull the horse, and the horse pulled the hay fork in order to get the hay up into the barns. And so I was paid 10 cents a horse each time I made a trip. Each trip I take would be 10 cents. So I made sometimes 60 cents that whole day, because I had to hold the horse forward and then take him back again and start over again.
And then did you guys grow your own, were you guys pretty self-sufficient?
Yes, we are completely, I'd say 100%. My mother, of course, grew chickens and had eggs, and we sold eggs. And my dad, of course, had the regular farm, which is what he cultivated the farms. He had cows too, so he was able to milk the cows, and then we had horses that did the farming. But that was before we had tractors. And then, of course, when we bought tractors, that was different.
And so, did you milk the cows also?
I know I tried to milk the cows, but my dad said he could do it a lot faster than I could. So besides that, my mother had us doing some other things inside the house at the same time.
And you had electricity and everything inside the house?
Originally, we had I was quite young. We had what they called a 32-volt electricity, and those were made up of about, I say, 15 jars of some kind of a acid that would produce electricity for our house. But it was all 32 volts, not 110. Then later on, my dad and mother, we all moved to another area in order to remodel the house. And it was remodeled from what it was to a house with the bathroom and the electric johns, both top and bottom. I'm not very good at this.
Oh, you're doing a great job. You're doing perfect. It's amazing.
And then one of my favorite things I remember was going to the Chicago World's Fair in 1934. And we loved of course, we loved dogs particularly, so we had some beautiful boxers, and we left the boxers, and we had my mother's mother, my grandmother, to come out and stay at the farm to feed the dogs and feed some of the animals. And of course, we had another man to do the farming for us while we were gone. And I just remember going to, when I was in Chicago, one of the main things when we went to the World's Fair, we went to Field's Department Store, I think it's the name of it. Oh, that's so long ago. And I remember that they had escalators there, and we had never seen an escalator before. Now this is back 1934. You can imagine a rolling stairway. So we rode that a few times, thinking that was a big deal.
Totally. And so, oh, okay, my battery is dying. Hold on one sec, Grammy. Let's see. I just want to get it level. Okay, I think that's good. Okay, so you were talking about, what were you talking about?
Living on the farm. Then I'd probably be interested about my schooling would be interesting to your family. When I was old enough to go to school, I was 5 years old when I went to the first grade, and my sister and I had to walk to school approximately a mile on the farm roads to go to school, and it was only a one building schoolhouse for 8 grades. And after 2 years, we moved to another school where we had a school bus to take us to the school. And now we have 2 schoolhouses. The one schoolhouse will be the first to the first, second, third, and fourth grades, and the other schoolhouse is fifth, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So I would graduate from that school, you know, and when I was only, let's see, then I went on to college after I graduated from there. Is it still going?
Yeah, keep going.
Okay, went on to college, and when I was only 16 years old, and went to Ohio State University, and became a member of a sorority there, and really realized when I got down there that I was quite young to be in college, and didn't know all the ins and outs of everything. But I had a big sister in the sorority, and she in turn was able to keep me on the straight and narrow path. Because sometimes I'd go to fraternity parties and there would be what they call some kind of a big bowl of grape juice, quote unquote. Well, she told me that is not grape juice, that is filled with vodka. I said, what do you mean vodka? Anyway, make a long story short, she said, promise me you will not drink more than 2 for the whole evening. 2 drinks for the whole evening. And of course I said, why? And she said, because you won't realize that you're not going to be able to handle it too much. So I said, I always bragged on her at later years. I realized how important that was, because I could have got myself in real trouble the first year in school down there. Okay, that was big. So I really thanked her so much for being such a good big sister. That's what sororities are supposed to do, but some do, some don't. Then I graduated from college, I told you from high school. Then at my second year in college, between my sophomore and junior year, and this is during the war, this is back in, well, it'd have to be approximately, it would be 19, let's see, I went to school in 1941. This must have been in 1943. We were in the war with the Europeans, or with Japanese and Europeans, and the Curtis Wright Company was in Columbus, Ohio, and they were building the airplanes for the government, and I don't remember what kind of plane it was now, whether it was a Cessna or what it was, or any of those airplanes at that time, and they were begging for people to come to work for them because they needed all kinds, and everybody who could either be in the manufacturing or in the financial world. And so I went out to get a job during my summer months during between 1943, and I worked in the county department out there. And after the summer was over, they wanted me to stay another year because they needed people to work there. And of course, my mother kept saying, "You will, if you stop now, you might not finish college." And I said I promised her faithfully that I would finish college. So I stayed on that whole year. But while I'm there, I'm making good money, you can imagine. So the extra money that I had from after my expenses were paid, I decided to take some flying lessons out at Port Columbus, which is right next door practically to Curtis Wright. And that I could take like a half an hour at a time, a certain amount of money and so forth. So I built it up to 8 hours, and then I went back to school and finished college. And after college, I met my husband in my senior year, I think it was, through a fraternity brother of his who was in my class. He wanted me to meet this guy. And Stan was coming home from the war, and of course he had all kinds of girlfriends, and he was writing and so forth. And his fraternity brother said to him, "I want you to meet this girl." And of course Bob Guest said to me, "I want you to meet this guy." And at that time I was pinned to somebody else, and he said, "No, I just have one date. Well, that one date turned it into, we had so much fun because we talked, never stopped talking that whole evening. And of course, we went back to the sorority house where I was living at the time, and house mother was out there watching to see what was going to happen, and closed that door right at 1 o'clock. So we really had to hurry like mad to get back and get through for the evening. So that's how I met my husband, and of course we were married a couple of years later because he had finished engineering school, and so it was 2 years after he graduated that we got married, and lived in Columbus, Ohio for a couple of years, and then
Tell me about your wedding.
our wedding was up in Kenton, Ohio, at my mother and dad's farm, and my sister was my maid of honor, and a couple of my sorority sisters were the bridesmaids, and we had the reception out at my mother's and dad's house on the farm, and I had, you know, it was a beautiful wedding. The only thing I remember is that I forgot to take my strapless bra to the church while I was dressing at the church, because the church was about 10 miles away. So I told my dad to go home and find that bra, bring it in. And he, of course, he laughed. He said, "I don't know what you're talking about, Harley." But anyway, he found it, and it all came out okay. But you know, you can imagine trying to get married without that. So that was an interesting thing. So then we had the reception out at the farm, and then we went on our honeymoon. And my sister and brother-in-law, of course, were involved in the wedding thing also. And so they followed us by car, and we had to go across a railroad track. It scared us so much because my brother-in-law and my sister, who were in the same car behind us, chasing us, they were also going. The train was coming, and of course we went across the railroad track, and they came right on. We thought they were going to get hit, so that really scared us. You can imagine. Anyway, we went on to Cincinnati, Ohio, stayed there all night, and then went down to North Carolina after that to be with Stan's grandfather that he loved so dearly at his gorgeous southern home. And it was just a typical southern gorgeous home with all the beautiful columns out there. And you'd laugh because Stan's grandfather always liked his Jack Daniels. And Stan, we stopped at the liquor store and bought a pint of black Jack Daniels, but Stan said he hid it when we went up to greet them. And then when grandmother wasn't looking, great-grandmother wasn't looking, when she was not looking, he put it in the flower pot and told Granddaddy Huffman that it's in the flower pot. But he looked like a Southern colonel. Had the gorgeous gray hair, just like the Colonel Saunders it was in the Wendy's company. Okay, then we left there and came back, and Stan and I worked after he graduated from college. He worked in the gas station for 2 years after we were married to make enough money to graduate from college because he was in the service. He needed another year or so before he graduated. Then he was going to go to work for his dad in the insurance business, but because of family problems, we decided that we wanted to do something on our own, so we gave up that opportunity and then went on to live we moved to Hartford, Connecticut, and I worked in the insurance company up there in the accounting department, and he worked for Pratt & Whitney, which was the name of a company, and he was a salesman, and then later on became sales manager, and then later on became national sales manager for that company. And then another gentleman who worked at the E.W. Bliss company called him and asked him to come to work for E.W. Bliss because they needed someone who with the national sales manager's experience. And so then we went to and then moved. At that time, we moved to Canton, Ohio. And it was called the E.W. Bliss Company. And after a while, after about I guess 4 or 5 years, the people in New York City who owned E.W. Bliss Company were going to replace all the president of the company. But while they're doing that, they fired 4 of the presidents during that first year, and they were very upset that Stan was very upset because he said when they asked him to fire all the people over in Europe, the people who were representing E.W. Bliss Company and over in Europe were to be fired because they didn't think they needed them. And my husband said, "Oh, thank you very much. We're not going to do that." So he decided to give up going to E.W. Bliss Company and quit that job, and then came home that day and said he'd like to start his own company with me, and if we could start the S.E. Huffman Corporation. because he had some good ideas. And luckily, General Electric was one of the main big companies that gave him an opportunity to bid on a company that, on a machine that they wanted. And he said that they couldn't find a machine, so he decided to build one. And that's how our company started and became a computerized company with everything going as a computer automatically. And in order to make our company successful, he was able to hire a fantastic engineer in California who was a member of another aircraft company, but he was able to talk him into coming. But he had this long beard down to his stomach and big bushy hair. But he was a genius, so Stan would tell him what he wanted, and they designed it. But somebody had to mathematically get these 8 axes to be moving all at the same time, which is a very difficult thing to do. But luckily we were the first people to be able to do that. And then the Japanese came along and wanted to buy the company. Well, of course, what they wanted to do was buy it and sell it, right away. And he was determined he was not going to sell it to anybody who's going to spin it off. And he finally found a South Carolina company to be the ones who would buy his company, and because all the employees were like a family to us. And each time that the family would have we had a Christmas party every year at Christmas time with our employees, and each time they would say, "Wonder why we don't get more the company like all the other companies get bigger bonuses." And he said, "Your bonus is adequate because we have a profit sharing plan, and you are part of it, and you will get a big part when you resign, and when you resign retire." And now I'm receiving, believe it or not, phone calls from so many of the people who were at that time thanking the SC Huffman Corporation for all the money that they're getting through their profit sharing plan, which was a big deal to us. But we treated everybody as a family and tried to share everything that we had with them. Okay, now time goes on, and Stan and I did a tremendous amount of traveling, and we both loved to play golf. We both loved to ski. So during our travels, we did have a place in Rochester, New York, but also built a place up in the Adirondacks to learn to ski while my daughter and son were 4, I think they were about 4 and 6 or something when we first started to ski. And of course they learned very early. And then later on, when we moved, started our own company, we, to say, living in Rochester. And then when we moved to, after the kids were all through college and married, we moved our company down to near Charlotte, North Carolina, which was the taxes are so much better in the Carolinas than it was in New York State. It was like getting a raise in salary right away. So they moved down, and then we found out that taxes are better in South Carolina than they were in North Carolina. But we're only 25 miles from the Charlotte area. But we bought a place that was on Lake Wiley, which was the River Hills Plantation, and that was built by a gentleman who had built Hilton Head down in Charleston, South Carolina. And it had a big lake there, and so we bought a boat and played an 18-hole golf course and tennis courts, and so we started this. And the club had started, and we found out that the first 200 people who bought lots there would get membership free. But as soon as, and so I was in Rochester and Stan was in Charlotte, and he called me, he said, "Honey, I bought a lot tonight." And I said, "You did what?" And he said, "Well, no, wait a minute." He said, "Listen to me," because he said the first 200 get the membership to the club free if you get in before the 200. And I said, "Oh, that I understand." So then we moved there, and we found our taxes for the company was a lot cheaper in South Carolina, and we were the borderline between North Carolina and South Carolina was right in the middle of that lake, which was like the lake was only maybe a mile wide at the most. So it was good taxes being saved for both personally and company. And then to find a place that you could build. Stan got on the phone at that time and found out the nearest town that was near Lake Riley, which was not a manufacturing town. The town that was near that was called Clover, South Carolina. He said, "Is there anything available for rent or for sale down here?" And they said, "Well, why don't you come on over and we'll go find out a sales organization." And he found out that there was they were selling a meat market, and that the factory was there, and it was no one was using it. He said that you could come look at that, so he did. We went over there and he bought that. And immediately, they did not have an office, so he immediately went down, bought a mobile home, and attached it immediately to the building in order to have someplace. And then that's where we had our business down there. Then we, of course, hired other secretaries and other people to help us out. And I had a gal who helped me out in the office. And of course, he got the engineers and so forth to come with him to help in the manufacturing. So that's how we got into Clover, South Carolina. And some of our customers, who would be GE or Boeing or some of the big Pratt & Whitney companies who were interested in our machine, would be amazed to see this type of machine being manufactured in such an area that was so just one red light in that whole town. And everybody said, wondered who in the world this guy from the north would be coming down there and starting a company like this. But it has grown like topseed. It started out with one building, then went to 3 buildings, and then we're up to 6 buildings now. And he sold the company to a company, Springs Company, in South Carolina. Now, they promised faithfully they would never spin it off to anybody else. So, and this is 2017, and the company's still going and doing well. So I think, to me, that is an accolade as far as S.E. Huffman is corporation. But if you looked it up on in business, why it's called Huffman now. They took away the S.E., but it's still Huffman Corporation.
Wow. So tell me just in one sentence. Here, I just want to fix this. Okay. In like a couple sentences, really succinctly, what do they make?
Okay. Well, it's a machine. You mean what they make? GE makes airplane engines. Boeing makes airplane engines. And in order to put these blades on the inside of an engine to be properly done, it used to be done by hand, and so like I would say, like filing it has to be at certain angles to be at the proper angle, and that would become computerized and would be done automatically and save the time. You can imagine the time that was saved as far as manufacturing is concerned. GE and Boeing and all of them were just waiting so much to have these machines, they couldn't find them any place in the world. And that's when he decided to put it down in black and white and get somebody who could make that machine.
So how did he end up getting into how did you guys get into the aviation business?
Oh, okay. Now, while we were, when we were in Rochester, New York, as far as the flying was concerned, he came home one day because his engineers that he had in Rochester would have to take a commercial airline from Rochester to someplace, and then somebody else someplace else to get to the place that he wanted, where the people lived. He said, but you got to have an airplane to cut down the time that they would lose in flying. So he came home one day and he said, something, you've always wanted to learn to fly. I said, if I buy a plane, then you take the lessons and get because it takes a long time to get your license, because you have to go to school and take the instructions as far as the homework is concerned, all the rules and regulations and how to do this, that, and the other. And then I would take flying lessons up there, and then I bought the plane, and that's where I got my first license, was up there in Rochester. It's an international airport. Now, one of the things that really is amazing to me, because after we were through flying this one particular time, the instructor got out and he said, "Okay, Mrs. Subin, I want you to take your flight up." I said, "Wait a minute, aren't you going?" He said, "You've been waiting to solo, And he said, that means you go up alone, and you go ahead and get on the plane, and you come back and we'll talk. Okay, I get in the plane. The first thing it said, all right, 6488 whiskey. You go off on runway 25, and then he gave me the instructions on 25, and turn left, turn right to get to the runway. So I took off, and all of us, I'm getting up there, and all of us, the control comes back and said, 6488 whiskey. When you're on your return to the airport, you plan to come in on runway 7. And because we're going off on 25, and you normally, when you go off, you always come back in on the same runway because of the wind directions. And so I'm flying along, and now I can't turn over and go over the curb and think about this for a while. Had to keep flying and say, where in the heck is runway 7 in my mind? Real fast, going along at 160 miles an hour, straight out there. So I said, okay, I'll just keep going until they put two and two together, so I can do that. Then it said 6488 whiskey. Plan your approach plan your approach on the other side of the airport. They didn't say it that way. They had terms that they used. So because when you go off, you always turn left when you're going to be coming back in. This time I had to turn right. So not only did I not realize where I'm going to, where that runway is, then then you go back to your ground school. And oh yes, 25 is a reciprocal of 7, which means you go in, and I was coming back, going off this way, and then I had to come back in this way. But in order to get to this way, I said, because I normally go turn to the left when I go up there, and I would have turned left. He said, I'd had to turn right, come in this way, see, all the way around the other direction. It was unbelievable. So when I landed, of course, at that time, whenever anybody gets their license or gets their solo flight, they always cut the shirt tails off the fellas' shirts. And of course, I didn't know what was going to happen, but he just congratulated me. He said, "You did good," and so forth. Because I came back when I landed the plane, I got off there and I said, "Mr. Joe, why did you do that to me? Why did you throw that dart to me?" He said, Mrs. Huffman, with a solemn solemn smile on his face, and said, "Mrs. Huffman, this is an international airport. I had nothing to do with it." He had no idea who you were at all. You were a plane taking off. I said, "Oh dear." I realized he put me down just like he should, So he did a good job. So anyway, I came home, or going back and called Stan and said, "Guess what? I just got my solo flight." He said, "What?" And he had a really good customer who came in from Connecticut that day, and they always took customers out to dinner. He said, "Really?" He said, "We're going out to dinner." And I said, "No, you've got the customer in." He said, "I'll take care of that." So when I got home, and he got home, we went to another place that night when there wouldn't be any customers around at all, and had a good time that night. First time he's ever put me in front of any customer.
So tell me, how did it feel to be you were one of the only female pilots, right? And you flew, tell me that story, and then also how you flew into JFK and stuff, or LaGuardia.
Okay, all right, then, during this time we lived in Rochester, my son Greg was an avid sports person. He played football, and of course he had to have a medical certificate each year. He played football, and this particular year the doctor said, "I don't want you to play football this year." He said, "What would you do if I didn't let you play football?" Because he said he knew he needed to do something magnanimous. So anyway, he said, "Maybe I'll take flying lessons with my mom." And he said, "Great." So he came out to the airport in Rochester and started to learn to fly. Of course, boy, he took it off like you wouldn't believe. He just knew. But he also had to go through ground school to learn the same things that I had to learn. But while I was learning mine, he was sitting in the back seat, and of course, there's one instruction that you have to do when you're flying. You have to learn to pretend like there's a pole right in the middle of an ordinary field, we'll call it. And you fly around that field at a 720-degree radius. Now you're flying. How can I explain this? Because your airplane's deep like that, because you have to make a complete circle perfectly around this imaginary pole down there. I don't know how you explain that. So in the meantime, Greg is in the back seat, and the instructor turned around and he said, "Your son's getting green," because he was getting dizzy because I was doing all this. Then now I get over here, and then I turn it back and go back the other because you have to do it both ways. Learn to do it on your flying. This is part of the instructions that you learn as you go on to get your. And then I went on later on. I got my pilot's license. Multi-engine license also. So that's two engines. Then you have to know how to fly through clouds. You have to take another instruction, another school to fly through clouds. You just can't go out there and fly through them. You have to be with the control tower is the one who directs you how you do this when you're flying through clouds, so you don't get hit. So otherwise you cannot fly through clouds at all until you get an instrument rating, is what it amounts to. So you read all your instruments, and all your flying is just by instruments. And because you can't see out and see anything because you're in a cloud. So you have to know how to get through that. So that was part of it. So anyway, all together. Then after Greg and I, now we're talking, you can hanger talk all the time, And of course, Sandy would be in the back. So whenever we flew down like to Florida, I was the only one who had the license, but the other two were taking lessons, of course. And they, of course, being men, they thought they knew more than I did. So each time, but I said, I'm the one that's going to lose the license if we don't do something right. So after they discussed it, I still went ahead and did what I thought was the right thing to do. Not that that was wrong, but we had to discuss it. So Sandy's in the back of the plane. She has nothing. She laid me out of it. So, but she was reading back there. But anyway, I always had to make sure that, I'm trying to think what I was going to tell you about coming down to Florida. Well, anyway, I guess that was it. So that we came down to visit grandmother, one of our Aunt let's see, Lina, that's right. She had a place in the middle of Florida that we could go to visit there. That's what that was.
But so then for a long time you were like the personal pilot for this company, for S.C. Huffman, right?
Oh, yeah.
And you sometimes flew into New York?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, right. Sometimes that. In fact, Greg was with me that time when we went into New York City. And I was right in front of I'll never forget this, a B-47. And of course, they're going a lot faster than my plane was. And they said, 64888 whiskey, please, accelerate your speed. You're right. The B-47 is right behind you. And that was at Kennedy Airport. You can imagine that. So during that time, then we had a machine tool show in Chicago. I forgot about this. Machine tool show in Chicago. Of course, they had taken our machines up there. So I was to fly up to Chicago and bring the plane up there because Stan had gone up with the machines ahead of time and had to come up and be part of that. I had to, we had to run the machine tool show up there, and I was the cocktail hostess at night and in the booths in the daytime. So each time we go in the morning, we'd get up, and after we'd entertain the night before, people would come in and look at the machines, and we'd then have a cocktail party. The next morning, went out there, and here were the Japanese guys inside of our machine taking pictures. And of course, you can take pictures of the inside of the machine, but if you don't know the mathematics on how the machine works, it's no good. And they kept trying to badger, Stan to let them know something, naturally. And of course, they were trying to steal all our information. Anyway, that was one of the main things but I flew up and I landed at Lakeside up there, which is the closest airport to the downtown Chicago. And it was Lakeside. I think it's called Lakeside. I forgot it, but I don't even know whether it was still in business. I think they had it up. I don't know whether they still. It's right next to the downtown area, but it's a very small airport. So you have to be very careful. They don't let the big airlines come in there, just the private ones.
What's the longest that you flew? The longest distance?
Well, then when Stan got his license finally. Then we flew all the way down to Texas to visit some friends down there, and they in turn had a place in Mexico that they wanted us to go down to. So we went across the Mexican border and landed at their spot, private landing strip that they had on their property down there. And I just say, when I look back at all those things that happened, unbelievable. Anyway, I loved flying. Both Stan and I really enjoyed together, we did a very good job because we always followed every rule like we should. In other words, you can't have a drink less than 12 or 24 hours. I think it's 24 hours. I forget now. But we always were very good about that, following the rules like you're supposed to. Because I remember when I was taking my instrument landing exam, the guy next to me said, "Mrs. Simple, what did you get on question number 14?" I looked at him. I said, "I don't believe that mine is the same as yours, because they don't give you each of you get the same exam. They mix up the exams." So I said, "My number 14 is not the same as yours." But then I got to thinking, if he's cheating here on this thing here, I don't want him up in the air. There's no way. So, and I didn't say that to him, but I'm just telling you that we all are very careful about giving out that kind of information. You never would do that, because you don't want that. That's not right. So anyway, that was another interesting thing that happened to me as far as flying was concerned.
Did you see a lot of other women?
Then I forgot to tell you. Oh, that's right. That was the time that my mother, belonged to a bridge club type of thing in Kenton, Ohio, and so all the girls said, "Well, what are you going to have for Mother's Day? What are you planning on Mother's Day?" She said, "Oh, my daughter's going to be flying down to visit me on Mother's Day." And they said, "What?" And so one of the ladies was the mother of the girl who was a social editor at the local paper. So she went to the phone and called this social editor. So they came out. Of course, when I landed, there were photographers there taking pictures. And that really got me, because I have a picture someplace around here. But all that is my album that was lost through my, before we were married or after we were married, younger life, way back. So I always carried that along with me in my hand, and didn't pack it away with all the other books. But and somehow or another it got lost when we were moving from different times. And, okay, then we moved. Okay, well, let's see. As far as flying is concerned, I guess those are the main points.
Okay, tell me a little bit about your golf career. How many holes in one have you had, and how many championships?
Okay, let's see. I've had 4 holes in one, and 3 club championships. And
how about Grandpa?
Well, no, he didn't have any. Well, he had a hole in one. He had a hole in one. That's right out of RP here. And of course, I think he ended up with two holes in one. So he always kidded me, because he always wanted to be. But anyway.
Any championships?
Pardon?
Any championships for him?
No. But I was lucky that, as I say, probably not too many women play like men always playing. So, but I had a gal that I played against for 3 years up at the Hounders. I'll never forget it. And she was avid. She had a low handicap. She had about 8 handicap. And my point is, I couldn't beat her. But then the more I played with her, she didn't have the
mental strength or
strength. Well, she would antagonize you by saying, "Am I out of bounds or am I not out of bounds? And is this things like that. That as a rule that you just automatically don't ask your opponent." So I said to her, I said, but the second time after I had a chance to play with her a couple of times in the championship, I said, "The pro is just right there. He's right behind you. Why don't you ask him?" Now, she was trying to upset me, and so when she did that, boy, I put the pedal to the metal, is that what you call it? And hit that ball on the ground. I'll never forget. I was way down here, and the hole is way up there. I'll never forget that as long as I live. And they all said, "Hey, look at that," because the ball ended up. It was a par 5, and it ended up about 3 feet from the hole. I guess the dander on the inside of me took over, and I had a birdie on that hole. And very seldom do you get a birdie on that kind of a long hole, But anyway, I remember it, and so I walked, and so finally when we finished that day, she came and she said, "Well," she said, "that's the only time you're ever going to beat me." So she tried to be nice at the very end, in a roundabout way.
Just quickly about Grandpa's family. Like, where did he grow up? And you don't have to focus on the negative, you could just focus on the...
Okay. All right. Well, Stan grew up in Columbus, Ohio. He had a sister, and his he had a fantastic grandfather down in Carolina, and he would go down to visit him every summer. So his grandfather, who was Stan's mother's father, they just loved each other. But he had, like, 7 or 8 other grandchildren too. So but my husband was always his favorite. So
How about like the whole rags to riches? Like, wasn't he very poor as a kid?
yes, you mean my Stan was?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, my Stan never got it. He went through college. I mean, his dad only gave him $40 for a slide rule. That was the only thing he gave him. Well, but he worked at a gas station the whole time to make the money. Standard Oil, and of course they tried to get him to go with Standard Oil when he graduated. But the money was better under machine tools industry than it was for that. He preferred that better than just doing the gas thing, because he wanted to get involved into engineering studies. And I could see that his mind was diverted to thoughts on how to improve everything. Anyway, and he had his mother worked hard in the dress shops, and he did not have a really good young life, but he didn't realize that as much because his sister got absolutely everything. His mother spoiled her rotten, I'll put it that way. But anyway, Stan's mother was very jealous of me because I was taking over the love that she had for Stan, my husband, and her daughter, but because the father and the mother never got along really, and the mother was the one that even bought the furniture in the house with her selling in the clothing store where he could afford it, but he said we didn't need that much. We didn't need that furniture that were there. He just bought whatever he thought was necessary to sit on.
Tell me about Grandpa's time in the Army.
Oh yeah, Stan, when he okay, in 1942 he went to Ohio State, and same year I did. But in 1940 he was a sophomore, and that's when the war broke out in 41, and everybody was all the boys were giving up college and going to war, and so he did the same thing too, and he was going to go into at that time into airplane training. He wanted to be a pilot, and he got up to the final day or whatever it was, and the army the war changed, so they took all those boys that were going to get their degrees and would get their pilot's training certificates were shipped over immediately to the Army to be sent over to Europe to fight the war. And so he joined the paratroopers and became a paratrooper. And what's funny, one of the funniest things I've heard is that all the guys would be playing poker like mad, but he didn't want to lose any money that he had by playing poker. So he was able to find 3 other paratroopers to play bridge, and they played bridge during the war, which is most unusual. So anyway, Stan and I played a tremendous amount of bridge, of course, during the years. Did a lot of duplicate bridge playing too, and those of you who know anything about duplicate, you have to use your mind like mad and try to outwit the other opponents, And anyway, that was during the war. Then he was out of the war. He got out of the war, and let's see, it had to be probably 45 or 45, I think it was, when the war was over. I sort of forget. So that we met in maybe it was okay. That's right. He got on, I think, in December 45, and we met in January of 46, and we were engaged that following June, but we weren't married for 2 more years because we were both trying to save some money. And I had graduated, and I was working as a sales rep for a office equipment company, and they had these automatic typewriters at that time that if you put a film in, they would automatically type out how these things would work. And I sort of forget the company's, what the company was. Anyway, that was what they're just selling, the office equipment. And so that I was to go out and try to sell. For instance, Lazarus is a big department store, and whenever you get a letter that's a form letter, either had to be written out by hand, and this thing would be automatic right out, and we leave a blank, "Dear Mrs. Smith," and the blank would be there, and you fill in the Mrs. Smith, but the format would be done automatically. And then just, so it really cut out an awful lot of time for somebody else to be doing that manually.
So tell me, so was Grandpa like, he wasn't injured in the war? Was it hard on him?
He was not injured. No, he was not injured. Well, I'm sure, you know,
Do you think he killed somebody? Do you think he killed anyone in the war?
No, I didn't never actually. I don't know. I can't remember whether he actually shot somebody. I probably did, and probably like they don't even like to talk about things like that. If they shoot somebody, because I know he brought back a gun that was from on a dead German, and anyway, later on I gave it to somebody who was a gun collector, because it's just one of those things I didn't want to have around. Anyway, but he made it back okay. But I remember one of the things that he said was so, in his mind, he said he doesn't remember whether he'll ever forget that picture. They were coming up, and they had not heard anything about, they had no information from the newspapers at all, had no idea what was going on in the war. And so they had not heard anything about any of the camps letting the people out. And all of us, they're in a truck, and they're coming up this road, and he sees these people coming toward them, have these black and white striped clothing on. And they had no idea what they were, and they were thin as rails, thin as rails. And he said, then they realized those were prisoners that had been kept hidden for all those years and just starved to death. And he said that was the hardest thing. He said, I don't think I'll ever forget that. It took a long time for him to tell me that too, you can imagine, because they're trying to forget that. You can't forget something like that. And of course you read about all that, and you just don't realize it's possible that. And they had been walking like for a couple of weeks to try to get out of there. It was awful.
Wow. So tell me, what do you think, I know Marnie was asking you this, but what are the keys to being, because you were married for how long?
64 years.
Yeah. So what do you think are some of the keys to being married that long? Some of the...
respectful to each other, and not be, no one should be overpowered by the other one. Because of course Stan's father did that to his mother all the time, and I learned so much how not to do that, have that happen. And naturally Stan has his genes, and he was pretty definite so many different times. And yes, we had our fights, there's no doubt about it. We're normal, and we try to talk it out, and I would probably talk harder just to talk it out. And he said, no, that's the way it's going to be. And I said, no, that's my point. But it took a long time for me to finally make him realize I do have a point of view. But as I say, there weren't too many times that we didn't speak to each other, but that wouldn't be
What
too
was that
long.
one story that you said you didn't talk, you guys fought for days about? You told us the other
Oh,
night.
I know what you're talking about. Okay. And then when we were getting the business going and all this kind of stuff, there was a time that he wanted to buy something that was quite expensive, and of course he said, I'm going to borrow some money from the college fund. And I said, excuse me? And he said, well, I'm going to take his money, and instead of borrowing from the bank, I'm going to do this. I said, no. I said, you can't do that, because I said, that is something that is made out just for our kids to be able to go to college. He said, I know that's it. You don't think I'm dumb, do you? And I said, yes, I don't think you're dumb, but on the other hand, you have to listen to what I'm saying. I said, I put that away, and you knew I was putting that money away. I said, that's going to stay right there. Because my mother did that to my dad to be sure that my sister and I would be able to go to college. And she worked so hard, doing all the work that she had to do as a farmer's housewife, gathering eggs, feeding the chickens, carrying these heavy buckets of water and so forth. So I knew that if she could do it, I could do it. And it was difficult at the time. And of course he said, you're out of your mind. I said, no. I said, you're going to have to figure out some other way to do it. And so naturally he was able to find some way to do what he had to do. But it was easier to have that money to be in the bank and write it out, and that would be it for a while. And then it'd be another year before it'd go back in, and maybe 2 years, maybe 5, maybe 10, maybe never. You never know. And I was so definite about that. And it came out okay in the long run.
I love that your mom instilled that in you. Get along?
Well, they fought like that. I can remember my mother, because behind closed doors I heard that same thing, you're not going to use that money. Because, well, anyway, there were various times that she had to stand up for her own, naturally.
What were her parents like?
They were farmers, and
But believed in education a lot?
not particularly. No, my mother was the only one that went to college. But she never graduated. She had 2 years at college, and they called that, in those days, they called that a teacher's degree, I think it is. So she was able to teach school, a few years before they were married.
Cool.
And of course, her dad had to date her by driving I know something else I want to tell you, driving a horse and buggy at least 15 miles from one side of Kenton to the other side of Kenton. But when the date was over, he crawls back into my mother's house where she was living, and the horse knew the way home, and he'd go to sleep, and finally he'd get home. But he had to be wrapped up in a big heavy blanket, this kind of, and have heated bricks on the floor to keep his feet warm.
Wait, is it your parents?
Yes, no, yeah. My dad. That's how when he was courting my mother. That's before he had a car. Okay, then the other thing I was going to tell you about when I thought about the car thing was that I had a friend when I was in grade school, in the two buildings in the school. His name was Dwayne Ramsey. His dad had a Model T Ford. Now, a Model T Ford is something you probably don't even know what I'm talking about. It has pedals on the floor, and then they had on the steering wheel they had parts on the steering wheel that the throttle was on the steering wheel, and oh goodness, I can't remember how that all worked. And on the floor was something else, but the brakes. In other words, it was entirely different than it is now. And that's the way you drove that car. Of course, he came down, and I was only 10 years old at the time, or I guess he was 12. And his dad would let him drive the car around the farm, and so forth. So, but on the roads at that time, he was able to get down the road and let me drive the Model T Ford. I was so thrilled. Of course, we just drove around the farm there,
Tell me about, remember, you told me at one point, like, that you helped out refugees from the boat people?
In our company that we formed in Clover, South Carolina. I wish I could remember the history of it. Not Vietnam, but when some of those people, the boat people, okay.
I think it was the Vietnam War.
Well,
No?
I don't. Well, anyway, it was the boat people, and it starts with another name. Okay, I can't.
Cambodian.
Cambodia, that's it. Okay, all right. Our church at that time was trying to help the people.
Is that the church that you started? Or
Yeah,
no?
yes. We found it took a while. Yeah, we started that church. Ecumenical church is what it was, and so we were trying to help the boat people, and so they called Stan to see whether he could employ any of these people. And he said, "Oh, well, sure, I'll figure out something." So anyway, they came over, and they came to our house. And of course, they had an interpreter to try to interpret all this. So he put them all to work at painting machines, first of all, because anybody could paint a machine, quote unquote. And so then he could see how good some of these guys, then finally they had about 8 of those guys who were could put the machines together by instructions. They learned to speak more English all the time, instruction-wise and so forth. So that was quite a, to me it was wonderful. And all of them ended up owning their own companies there in Clover, South Carolina. Like restaurants, it was a restaurant business or food, something to do with food and so forth. And some went on to work with other companies too, Okay, let me see.
Such a good story.
Yeah.
So what do you think some of your values are? Like, in that situation, you wanted to help people that were less fortunate.
Both of us.
Yeah.
Okay, another thing. Oh, I know what I'm going to say. Okay, I remember that living in Columbus, Ohio, this is when Greg was born in Dayton, Ohio. We had moved to Columbus for our first house. So proud of our first house and all this kind of stuff. But anyway, we took Ronnie to raise. That's another story, of course. You all know that story. But anyway, Ronnie I had had a gal to come in every to help me clean because Stan was traveling all the time from Monday to Friday, working. He was working at that time for the E.W. Bliss Company or for Pratt & Whitney. I forget which one at that time, because this is before he owned his own company. This is after we were married, and Sandy was born in '49 and Greg was born in '51, so it had to be around that time. So Greg was probably, well, let's just say whatever it was in '51, about '53, probably about 2 years. Anyway, and I had hired this gal. Her name was, I think I never forget it. Never mind. Can't think of her name right now. Anyway, she had a son who was the same age as Ronnie, so all the clothes that Ronnie had, I would pass them over to her. And then she had a boyfriend, quote, so forth. And so little by little, I got a phone call one day and saying that she was asking for some help because they were in jail. I said, oh my goodness. I said, what? And so I somehow was able to go down and find out what it was all about. Well, it ended up, I can't remember all the details, but it ended up that they had been fishing at either along the river, probably along the river there, and they had different signs that whether you can fish or whether you cannot fish. And the signs are supposed to be that where they were fishing, there were no signs there. Because, okay, she told me about all this, so I drove out to where they're talking about. And whether I probably got her out maybe with, I have no idea now, but she was with, she said, it's right along here someplace. Okay, I'm driving along, we went down to look, there was no, you couldn't find a post at all that said no fishing. That's what she was charged with. You're not supposed to fish along wherever this was. So anyway, they put them right in jail, she and her boyfriend. And so I got him out, somehow I got him out. Now, Stan's not home yet. As I say, he's gone from Monday to Friday. And so then I got to think about this, and so I finally called one of the editors of the Columbus Dispatch, which was be like our Naples paper here, the Columbus Dispatch, and explained to them that I drove out and said I didn't see any signs there, and I said they're supposed to be posted someplace. That's what they're being charged for. And they said, can we come talk to you? So I got them to go out there to see that same thing. To make a long story short, the justice of the peace was the one that did all this stuff. It ended up finally went to the state, and they finally they ousted the justice of the peace to rule on stuff like this from then on. So that goes so far back I can hardly remember all, but I remember that I was so happy. Okay, now she of course naturally she's happy as can be. So we had they said, how can we ever pay you? Because we had I don't know, like $250 or $300, whatever it was at that time, maybe $500, I've forgotten. Anyway, we were going to have our house painted because it needed another coating of paint. And so we had hired him, her boyfriend, Leo, I guess his name was. Anyway, but they were just great people, just hard-working people, make a long story short. And anyway, that's how they worked it off, was through doing things like that. And then when Ronnie, as I say, when we moved from there to, let's see, that time we moved from there we went from there to Rochester. Yeah, when Greg and Sandy were young, to Rochester, New York, to work up there for the E.W. Bliss Company. Now we went from Pratt & Whitney to E.W. Bliss somewhere along the line there. Stan was sales manager for E.W. Bliss up there in Rochester, and that's when the kids went to school in Pittsford, New York area. That's where we live. Pittsford is a suburb of Rochester. And then they went to school there. And then then we stayed there until they had graduated from high school and college. And then, let me see, then we moved from there to Canton, Ohio. Now wait a minute, there's somewhere in there. I know, okay. All right, I see. Somewhere in there. Okay, we went from Rochester back to someplace. Then we came back to Rochester a little bit later, because Stan became general sales manager. That's what I mean. Anyway, these are details. I can't quite remember exactly but anyway, they ended up going to finishing college, high school, and college. They went to Cornell from there.
Yeah, totally.
you know, boy, that's taking me way back. I may have some of these details a little bit mixed up with that.
Oh, that's okay.
It's not that
Doesn't matter.
much.
And let's see, you guys did tons of traveling, you and Grandpa. What was your favorite place that you went to?
Oh, every place. We loved on a smaller ship. We always liked the smaller ship because we played bridge. That's how we got to learn to play bridge. We joined the bridge clubs on the cruise because we had excellent teachers teaching us how to do different rules. There are an awful lot of different rules in bridge that you really should know, but you don't use them all. You just use how much you can comprehend. But anyway, after a couple of weeks, you get to be pretty good, you think. Then you come home and play with your own buddies and think, oh, wait a minute, I don't remember that. But you're trying to put two and two together and figure, oh, I see, okay. As I say, it's different, but it's a good way to learn to play bridge. We went, oh God, one of my favorites, I think it would be when we went to South Africa. We went from London to South Africa. And then South Africa was so beautiful down there. And we went all the way down to the Cape where the waters really come together on the two oceans, you know. And then spent about a week or so there. Now we're under. We got the sales rep from England. Everybody Kent, K-N-T, Kent. That's close. There's something else, Abercrombie Kent. No, that. It's something like that. It was so well voiced on everything, all the government down in South America, what you could and could not do. So then we flew by small plane from this place to that place. We go from South Africa to I wish I could remember these names of these places. We all know anyway, but you're always in a group. And then she took us to the jungles there in South Africa, and we went actually down to the tent where you know these tall black people have these great, what's their name? There's a name for that.
Serengeti, the Maasai.
Yeah, he was the tallest one. He was, you know, he had ruling it it's like a king type of thing. But then we went to their actual tent, which is a pyramid type of thing. 3 families lived there: their mother and the father, their grandfather and the grandparents and the parents, and then their young kid had just gotten married and they had a brand new baby. All of this tent, half the size of this room, if you can imagine. And anyway, and they cook, of course, with the cow dung, you know. And of course, the cows would come right up, and you could, you know, scratch their noses and all that kind of thing. And then they had their wares out on like a clothesline, and you know, had all these things. And of course, we all bought everything because that made them happy. We want to make them happy while we're there, because they don't attack people, but on the other hand, you're scared to death of them. I'll put it that way, and you know you're going to be kind to them, no doubt, because that's their territory. But you know, the experience that we had doing that. Then of course we went through and spent a week, and we spent another with an organization. By this organization, still had us to spend a week in like a park type of thing, but the main dining room would be up there, and the rest of it had tents all around with zippers on the tents so that you could keep the monkeys out. And so we thought, well, it's probably going to be dirt floor. We go in there, hardwood floors on the floor, and they're actual tents that you had a zipper on the outside, and you had to, when you left, you zip that around because the monkeys would get in. Because one lady forgot to do this one night, and she came back, all of her pills were gone. Everything a monkey got into everything, and it took care of everything. But we'd get up in the morning, you wouldn't go into that main place at all until someone came down, and the soldiers, not soldiers, but the people who they call them, I mean, they have their guns with them,
yeah.
So take care, because they're all wild animals all around it. And elephant was right out our window right
cool.
there. It was unbelievable.
That's so cool.
And of course, you see all the other animals around. Then we took a ride like you see in the jungles, and and you're in. You can sit up, you stand up in the
Jeep.
I call them truck. There's another name for all this stuff. So then one time they stopped, and the camels, we could come over, you could scratch their noses, Some you can and some you can't, But
That's so cool, Grammy.
All the wild animals were it's so interesting.
That's
so
so
we spent almost a week in that general area.
Cool. So is there any, I forgot to do this.
And then we went on to, we did.
Is there
We went on over to, all these places. Right, okay, my air, where we go to the airport over here on the East Coast is, you know this so well.
You can tell me that later.
Oh, okay.
But tell me, is there anything else from your life that you want to share that we haven't talked about yet? We did pretty good.
Well, of course, we ended up in Egypt, and we went through the museums up in Egypt. As I said, we were gone a whole month at this trip down there. It was absolutely fantastic. The time we got home, we were that's where I got my elephant, you know. That's all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And all my animals I have on top of in my office in there. They're all from places where we've been. And I guess one of the main things I was going to tell you about when we go up, we went on a cruise with Marge and Bud Martin, who live here in Marbella, on the left side of Norway, because we had been through between Norway and Sweden on another cruise. That's just, you just look and see things. But this other left was the left of that went north of the Greenland, up in the got it?
Oh yeah. Okay, we're good. Keep going.
Up in the Lapland country, and you see when you walk up to where they open up the grocery store, there's a big sign outside. Everybody, if you're going outside, be sure you have a gun because the polar bears all around there. And it was unbelievable that you cannot go out unless you have a gun because the polar bears will come after you, you know. Oh boy. So we had a guide every place naturally, you know. But it was the most beautiful, and the icebergs up there also. But it was, you can imagine, it's north about 100 miles north of Norway. I mean, it was way up there. It was just unbelievable. But that's one of the nicest trips also.
Cool, I want to do that. Okay, I guess I have one last question, which is, like, do you think that, you know how your mom was so adamant on you getting an education, do you think that changed your life by having an education?
Oh, absolutely. Oh.
In what ways?
Because my dad thought it was a good idea if we just stay there in the farm and take over the farm. And even when Stan and I were married, he said, you know, you can have this farm right here. You know, you can just come here and stay at the, maybe that's a good idea. I said, no, but I didn't do it in front of my mother and dad. I said, no, well, we'll talk about it. And then, but in no way would I go back and be a farmer because I know how hard it is. And the cows have to be milked every morning and night. But whenever we would go, we had to hire, you know, one of our neighbors or somebody to come over and do that kind of. So, and it wasn't that it was bad, but you had to be very, very responsible to do the things you're supposed to do on the farm. It's hard work. You've got to love it. You've got to love it to do to stick it there.
Mm. And you weren't into it.
Because it's lonesome. Because I was a tomboy and I had to play with the boys, and because the girls moved away and they lived in that house over there, they moved away. The only ones were left were playing were boys. Luckily, they were nice boys, and we played Monopoly a lot of times at night. And of course, you know, my mother would often wonder about what was going on. But you know, they would come to my house and play. That would be the best thing. I never went to their house and played because there were 3 of them and 1 of me. I'll put it that way. Of course, by bicycle.
How old were you?
We did bicycling. That's all I did was after my pony. I'd go back to my pony. He was the one that I could make him rear, and the kids would all be up with me while he's rearing. You know, right up in the air. We didn't use saddles or anything like that. Everything was bareback, and I think that was a big disappointment. That was the part that really broke my heart right there. Okay, let me see, what else I can think of? Oh boy, I wish I could remember anything like that.
We did pretty good. We covered a lot of your life. Yeah, I think we did pretty good.
I probably will think of, if I do, I'll write it down and then send it to you.
We can do it again, yeah. Cool, Grammy.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Thank you so much. A little bit of the house.
Okay, I still really got that. That must be in my office.
Yeah, it's from the other room. From the TV room, yeah.
Television room?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I've never seen them stacked like that. That's the reason I don't know.
Yeah, I mean
You had
it's
to take
kind
them
of.
apart then, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I had to take them apart. Yeah.
All right.
I'll put them back.
All I have to do is
So Mom was saying that I should help you
What's that?
with the printer or the
with
scanner.
the TV, I just want to know how to. There are so many things I don't know how to do, and I'm not really sure. Well, I want to make sure you write down the directions of how to send a thing to Sandy.
Like scanning or what?
Yeah, because what Wayne did, he wrote down some things there, and it doesn't make sense.
Okay.
Oh, there's so much. I wish I should have written down all the questions that I have for you.
Oh.
Okay, this gives you an idea on bridge.
Okay.
You have to know, like this is one convention. They're called conventions. You have to know how to do that. You have to know how to do all this stuff. Now, what I've done this for my partner so that we will correspond. And both of us are doing the same thing. Okay, this is what we have down here, and that it just doesn't make sense.
Oh,
to me.
okay.
Let me get my glasses here.
Is there not a better light in here, huh?
Well, I always open my window, my blinds here. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's much better. Can you open that one? Who's that? Oh.
I'm trying to remember where that was. It's probably down here, I imagine, or RP, one of the two. Can you get it?
Yeah, I got it. That's a cute one. What else do you have over there?
Oh, I don't know.
How about that one with someone, a famous politician?
And this is Henley. He was here about 8 or 10 years ago, whatever it was. And we belonged to someplace like Heritage USA, and they had us all come down to at the risk for something. That's what that is.
Cool. And what are all those? What are all those up there?
Oh, okay. This is the one I was telling you about. Feel that fur. That's the way the fur feels at a polar bear.
Wow.
But
Amazing.
of course, that's in Africa. I can't tell you where all these are,
Yeah.
but that's the reason I have them there.
Cool.
You can tell by the elk where I was. But this is up in the Lapland, way up there. Oh,
Cool.
I should have put notes on there for where they're from now.
Maybe the tag says it.
What?
Maybe the tag says it.
Probably could. I took, of course, we had them all. Those all been dusted recently. So this whole room had to be. This whole room was completely vacant when I got here. This was all. The rug was all gone, and
Yeah.
they had to move all this furniture out, all the closet, all this furniture out, put it in the hallway, any place.
Who did it for you?
Well, yeah, the decorator. We had to go get it from a decorator. You still taking pictures?
Just a little bit, just so because like you want to have some stuff to put so you don't see your face the whole time.
Right.
So they call this B-roll. It's just like you doing your thing. It's kind of, yeah, I know it's kind of weird. So what do you want to do the rest of the day, Grammy?
Well, okay, now I don't have to go this other, but I can wait. But I'd like to have you teach me exactly everything I want to know.
Okay, so what are some of those things?
Well, all right. Let's see. Get that thing right there and read that. And
Well, I should try it.
Yeah.
Oops. Okay. So here, find something that you want me to scan for you.
Well, okay. Let me see. This stuff. These are all. All this stuff is I have to take care of here. I'll put this in here. Here, I gotta get rid of this stuff here. Oh, wait a minute.
I mean, I can just do an example. How do you?
All right. Well, for instance, let me see. All right. Let's start with the Google. Okay. Now, okay. That's the way I get Google. Okay. Now, sometimes if okay. In other words, I finally found this. I have no idea what these mean up here, for instance.
Okay.
And I don't have anything that like a catalog that I could ask them.
Well, what do you want to find? Like,
Well, now, like
what would you want to Google?
well, now, no, I know how to Google now.
Oh, okay.
But I finally found out how to get to Google. My point is, I would put on the inbox, and this would be what I would get. And then I say, how the heck do you Google? So finally I went up in here to Gmail. No, that's not it. I finally went up here. It still doesn't do what I want to do. And I know I finally found out you can do it this way, but I'd rather do it the other. So I said,